Hello, I'm Kathy Seiden, Chief Advancement Officer at YWCA Greenwich. I'm happy you joined us for another event designed to empower women and create valuable learning opportunities for our YWCA members and the community. While this event is free, we are grateful for all the support we get for YWCA mission and programs. To make a donation or for more information, please go to our website at ywcagreenwich.org. Today, I'm very pleased to present to you Nina Restieri, the author of Overcoming the Mom Life Crisis and the founder and president of Mom Agenda. Nina has been featured in numerous outlets, including NBC's Today Show, Real Simple, Better Homes and Gardens, and the New York Times. Interviewing Nina today is Tara Restieri. Tara is on the YWCA Board of Directors and is a strong supporter of YWCA with her commitment to the success of events and programs. Thank you, Nina and Tara, for being with us today. And take it away.
Thank you, Kath. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Obviously, what we do, our work at the YW is always to empower women, and that's why I thought it was imperative that we have a great conversation with Nina Restieri. Now, some of you may actually be noticing that Nina and I have the same last name. Well, it's true. And we are not sisters. We are actually, in some ways, we're more than sisters. We've actually struggled to find the right words to describe our relationship. Nina is my husband's ex-wife. She's also my good friend and someone who I care deeply about. And so when she wrote this book and I read this book, I genuinely felt so inspired to really think about and reflect on how I take care of myself as a mother. And I think this book is something that everyone really should read. If you are a mom or expecting to be a mom, you should be reading this book. So with that, I actually want to start off with a question for Nina, my first question, which is related to the inspiration. So Nina, what is it that actually inspired you to write this book?
Well, thank you for the nice introduction, Tara. I think that, I went through my own mom life crisis, and I kind of went on a journey that took me approximately 10 years to really get through and come out of. And when I did, I felt like I had learned so much, but it was like a secret, it was stuff that no one tells moms. And in my business, I think the most common thing that people write to me is, I feel so overwhelmed. I feel so stressed. I feel guilty. So I realized that it was an epidemic among moms, the mom life crisis. So I thought, by my own life experience, I feel like I'm kind of an expert on this. So I'm just going to go ahead and start writing.
You certainly are an expert on it as the mom of four. So people also talk about, when you write a book, that doing that can either sort of energize you, or it can be an exhausting process that's very emotional. And, you just said it took 10 years for you to sort of go through this evolution. So how did you feel writing this book?
I would compare it to running a marathon. Sometimes I was energized, sometimes I was exhausted, sometimes I cried, sometimes I felt amazing. It was a journey in and of itself. And I went through a whole range of emotions.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I'm actually going to ask you something just a little different. Also, how did you feel when it was published? Were you
terrified?
Okay. Why were you terrified?
Because it's very personal. You've read the book. It's very honest. It's very personal. I thought the only way to make the book as powerful as it can be is to be really authentic. So I told the truth about my own journey, which is very, very personal. So then writing it was cathartic, but then when it was published, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? You know, everyone's going to know this stuff about me. So yeah, it's still terrifying just that it's out there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So would you actually say that, would you say that that Mom Life Crisis is actually like, is it a self-help book, or is it something that you feel, is it different? Like, how would you define it as a book?
I think it's a hybrid memoir and self-help. That's what it's kind of stories from my life and what I learned about overcoming the mom life crisis. So each chapter is kind of a little memoir and a little self-help.
Yeah. And interesting in regards to, I feel like, the timing of the release of this book. So when we talk, let's talk about the book itself, Mom Life Crisis. So how do you, how do you define it? How do you define that crisis? And in particular, right now, how do you think the pandemic actually impacted either the way that you define it or the timing of the book release? How do you think those things have played into it?
Well, I'm gonna read to you how I define it. So this is my book because I have a definition in here.
Oh, great.
Making choices every day that ensure you're at your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual best. So I think that the pandemic made it that much more important to practice self-care because so many of us were depressed, we're anxious, we don't have our social networks, we can't see our parents, our siblings, or, our friends, we can't go to the playground with kids. It's so, so important to take care of yourself when you don't have your support network and when you feel yourself kind of slipping. So I think it's more important than ever right now.
Right, I'm sure. I mean, I totally agree with that. And I do think you're right. There's just, the pandemic has made people understand how important these types of, self-care is. I do think that often, people talk about self-care and they think about it as I'll go to the spa, maybe a workout, and I think that, you and I have actually personally talked about how these things are defined in the past. And, I would love for those listening to hear, how do you define self-care? And, could you offer people listening ideas about self-care? And also, I mean, you're an exceptionally busy mom. You started your business because of the fact that you're so busy and trying to work. How do we find the time for self-care?
Well, this is a complicated question because so the way I define self-care, it goes way, way beyond going to a spa or getting a manicure. Like, I think doing those things is fun. I wouldn't call them self-care. I mean, I could go get a manicure right now. It's not gonna change my life. It's not gonna make me be my best. I mean, maybe it'll give me a boost in the moment, but to me, that's not what self-care is. Self-care is much broader, and I always say it's strategic rather than tactical. Strategic in that from the inside, what is important to you that makes you feel good? As you know, I am a monster if I don't get 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
That to me is self-care, getting my sleep. I'm a better mom if I get my sleep. So in other words, self-care to me is not something you have to make time for. It's part of your day and part of your decision-making process. It's making choices that you make every single day. What time am I going to go to bed? What am I going to make for dinner? Am I going to talk to that toxic person who keeps texting me? Making choices that you have to make anyway, but making them in such a way that you take care of you.
Do you think it's good for somebody to kind of take some time and just sit down and sort of make a list? I mean, you talk about it as like sort of starting on the journey and, really making it strategic. Do you think think of something important is to actually just sit down with yourself and say, these are the things, like you just said, my 8 hours of sleep is part of what makes me better, makes me efficient and all of those things. So do you think somebody should just actually take that time, and how do you start that journey?
Well, I do have exercises in my book. So if you buy my book, I walk you through how to do this, but it's, in a nutshell, it's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Those are your 4 categories. And what are your needs? Like, it's that simple. What are your needs? What are your physical needs? You and I both, I think, need exercise in order to be at our best.
Yeah.
But that's not everyone's need. We need to eat a lot of vegetables to feel our best.
Yeah.
What about emotionally? What are your emotional needs? Maybe you need really deep connection. Do you have that in your life?
Yeah.
Maybe you need to clear space, like clear out some friendships that are not serving you. People in your life that maybe you've outgrown, that maybe you're not your best with. Alcohol is another example. Saying no to the second drink because you have a meeting in the morning. Like it's very simple. Like, some people can have 5 drinks and feel great the next morning. That's not me. If I have more than 1, I'll feel pretty bad. So on my list is I only have 1 drink. So those are some examples of how you would make a list and think about you personally.
Yeah. So, why do you think it's so important right now to think about self-care? And also, kind of piggybacking on something that you also just said, is it selfish to think about that strategy, the things that you're talking about, without considering your kids in some ways? Do you think that's a selfish thing, or do you think that's actually, it makes you better because you're actually thinking about you, which makes you the better mom? When you're healthy, they're healthy. So,
I think that a lot of moms struggle with this. They think it's selfish to practice self-care. And it can be. You absolutely could go over the top with it, So it's up to each person what their balance is, and where the line is. I would say, though, that if I were to ask my kids, is mom a better mom now than 15 years ago, before all these practices became part of her life? They would say absolutely right now. When, like the saying, when mom is happy, everybody's happy.
yeah.
And you've said this to me as well in our personal relationship. When you're not happy, it permeates the entire family. Yeah. And I think that's true in every family. The mom is like the hub of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So you really do, I think you do need to take care of yourself to be the best mom you can be, in addition to being, the best you can be.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I know personally that I feel a lot of mom guilt. I grew up with Catholic guilt. Now I have mom guilt when I do things that are for myself. So in fact, sometimes I actually feel so badly about making choices for myself and doing things that I think are actually better for me, even whether it be exercise or taking a walk or whatever, that I'll actually stop doing it, or even cut short what I'm doing because that guilt sort of overwhelms me. So, you have this book, you've been so thoughtful. How can we moms actually help ourselves deal with, that guilt and overcome those sort of day-to-day challenges that that we run into as we're trying to do this?
I honestly think guilt is so unproductive, and I talk about it in the book. I don't think it does anyone any good. And I think when we start to feel guilty, it's kind of important to talk back to that voice. and, you know, that little voice in our head that tells us we're a bad mom if we go for a walk for an hour, you know, and say, actually, I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to exercise for an hour a day. You know, unless there's an emergency with the kids, I'm going to honor that commitment to myself because it matters.
That's awesome. Because honestly, that's just that idea of talking back to yourself. That's so simple. I mean, it really is. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's so simple to just be like, you know what? You set this time aside. Now it's okay for you to take that time to do it. So
it's 1 hour out of the 24 hours in your day. You're allowed.
Yeah.
You know, I think that little voice in your head, so many of us identify with it. We think that's us, but it's not. It's our little critical. There's one writer who calls it your inner mean girl. And it's not you. It's a voice that I don't know why that voice does that to us, but we have to sometimes tell it to go away.
Yeah, kick it out. Get rid of it. So could you offer us some like specific tools, you know, tips and tools for moms to, you know, to keep in our, you know, I always like my tool belt, you know, that when you're in a tough spot, say, you know, even some of the examples that we just talked about, maybe, you know, other times, you know, you should really be pulling out something, you know, like you just said, you know, flick away that mean girl, but any other advice that you have?
I think that one thing that I always like to recommend is kind of asking yourself, what do I need in this moment right now? And it's hard to do that when you're in the thick of it, you're overwhelmed. But sometimes you just need 10 minutes to breathe in and out. I think learning to say no is a big one. Being able to say no to people, being able to draw boundaries. You know, it's very individual, but you know, everyone has different things that will help them. So it's hard to say, but I would say the most important thing is to kind of tune into what you need. Kind of shut the world out and say, okay, what do I need in order to get through this situation?
Yeah.
And then you get through it.
And I guess constantly remind yourself of that too, because I'm sure that, you know, moms of young children versus moms of young adults and moms of adults are all going through lots of different, you know, it's like, as you've mentioned, it's like, it's an evolution. You've gone through your own evolution. And so here it's like, I feel like, wow, we talk about this kind of journey and talking back to ourselves, and would you say you're always doing, I mean, like, how often are you kind of doing that self-check, and how often are you?
I forget all the time, you know, it's a journey, and that we're all on, and we're all in different parts of it. Someone who read the book said to me, I think you wrote this book for yourself. It's true. You teach what you most need to learn. So I need to remind myself all the time.
That's actually a really good point. That's a really, really good point, because, you know, it's always like, see one, do one, teach one, right? You know, we always say that in school. You see one, you do one, you teach one. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure, and by you writing this book, it does, I'm sure, for yourself, allow you the authority to continue to re-strategize and change and improve and adapt.
Yes.
All of those kinds of things.
Yes. I'm always practicing, always.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I need to do a lot more practice. So I actually want to talk a little bit about Mom Agenda. So as, of course, you know, it's actually a little interesting background. I was using Mom Agenda before I met my husband, before I knew anything about Nina.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So I started using Mom Agenda. There was that housewarming store in Old Greenwich that I loved, and they carried it, and I thought it was brilliant. And I started using it years ago. But now, you know, my kids are older and I don't need to use Mom Agenda so much anymore. But I've actually now evolved into using my agenda, which I should have showed everybody. The thing is so thick, it's in my backpack out there somewhere. And my girls use it. So my daughters who, you know, while they were in college and outside of college are using my agenda. So my agenda is really, obviously I want you to kind of get into this and how this all evolved, but you know, first of all, how did you come up with the idea for Mom Agenda? How does it work? What about my agenda? I mean, can you tell us sort of the history of like, where did this come from and why it's so great? And frankly, why those of us, I mean, I am a paper person. I can't stand electronic. I'm not a big fan of using an electronic planner and all of that. So I love paper. So Mom Agenda and my agenda have been absolutely, sometimes I've tried to go away from, you know, from paper. Oh, everybody's got their phone out and has their agenda, but I kept gravitating back to using Mom Agenda and my agenda over all of these years. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up with the idea? How does it work? Maybe you can even show us, you know, some of your planners.
So when the kids were really little, and by really little, I mean 7, 5, 3, and 1. 4 kids, as you know.
Yeah.
I was a very, very overwhelmed, stressed out mom. And always like missing appointments. I would forget to pack the kids' lunch for school. I would forget to pick someone up. Like I was a hot mess. And one night I had a dream, and it was a dream about, I was in a bookstore and I was looking at a huge bookcase full of wedding planners, thousands of them, wedding planners. And I woke up thinking, you know what's so stupid? Brides have all these wedding planners for one day in their lives. Whereas I'm a mom, I'm putting on a major production every day and there are no planners for me. So then I went to Staples and I was like, maybe I can find something for moms here. And they did have planners for moms at Staples. But the planners for moms had little bunnies on them, you know, like little cartoon characters. Like I was like, I would never, like just because I'm a mom doesn't mean I want bunnies in my day planner, you know, like I still like nice things just because I'm a mom. So that was when I realized I decided to create something that would be functional for moms, like that would enable you to make your day easier, but would also be really attractive and something you'd be proud to take out of your bag and show people. And the way it works, so this is what's special about it. You plan your day here, Monday, Tuesday, etc., and you write your kids' names in the boxes and put their activities separate from yours. So that it took off right away. I was very lucky. The product was featured on the Today Show about 6 months after we launched, and it just blew up, which was great. And then in the second year, women started writing to me and saying, I love this layout, but I'm not a mom. So I want to use it for my classes, or I want to, wedding planners wrote to me and said, I want to use it for my weddings, my clients, decorators, all sorts of different types of, I had one woman write me and say, I want to use it for my prayers.
Oh, wow.
You know, like, and so what I realized is the sky's the limit. Anyone can use this. So that was when I developed my agenda for people who may or may not be moms, but don't want a planner specifically for moms. So my agenda looks basically the same. It has the same layout, but it doesn't talk about kids at all.
Yeah. And you always, and I also, to mention, you put I love the inspirational quotes personally.
I like them too. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's nice to actually, you know, that actually sometimes is just a moment, even for me. It's just a, you know what, stop, take a pause, read one of the inspirational comments, That's actually a nice way to just kind of be like, okay, now I'm gonna have to, let me sit down and get myself organized. Now,
I love that.
what about if, do you suggest, in terms of how people use it, do they keep one? Are there add-ons? Do you do other things where, like, I know for myself, if there is like an event or a dinner or something I'm planning, I don't necessarily put it into my agenda. I will use one of your tear sheets because you have some other products and stuff, and I'm not trying to sell products, but I'm just telling people that, like, you have all these other little additions and other things that are actually also helpful and useful. So frankly, people should go to your website. But I do want to talk about, see if are there any new products, or there are new ideas that you've been thinking about, or that are coming out that we should also think about?
Yeah, I'm always kind of thinking about what I need and trying to turn it into a product.
That works.
That's self-care, right? Focusing on your own needs. So after I wrote the book, I thought, well, I'm saying self-care is so important. Why don't we have a planner for self-care? So we started a planner for self-care, and it has, you can record your sleep, your meals, your exercise, your reflections, your gratitudes, your priorities, and you can also plan your day. And this is actually an undated product. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So
it's dated. So you'd add, you would do your dates, add your dates in on your own.
Yeah, and it's kind of like there's no pressure. If you're not totally focused on self-care every day, you're not going to feel like, oh, I skipped a few days. Like you just use it when you use it.
You know what? I think that's actually a really good point, and bravo to you for thinking of that, because I do think that people, when people talk about, for years now, I've heard everybody say things like, oh, you should be journaling, or, oh, you should be thinking, but I will start these things and then I'm like, I feel this pressure of actually having to try to do it every day. And frankly, I can't do it every day. So I love the fact that you actually have designed something that allows you to be like, you know what? I can wait a day or two to reflect on these things. That's brilliant. I actually haven't thought about, you and I have talked about this before, but I actually haven't thought about that before, because I can tell you the number of times I've started and stopped things like that, because I always feel that, again, that pressure of having to do it every single day.
Right. And my goal was, I don't want anyone to have to add this to their to-do list. Our to-do lists are long enough. I don't want to add to the pressure. So it's there to help you when you need it or when you want it. And when you don't, you can put it aside and there's no guilt.
That's good. I think that's great. So I think what we wanted to do, I have another question or so, but I think we also wanted to be able to open it up to see if anybody who is listening has questions. So Eileen, I think you can open and see if there are any specific questions for Nina. I'm sure that there's some here. All right. So I have an interesting question. So how do you, successful, you're a successful entrepreneur, we know that. You're a mom of 4, killer CEO. How do you manage it all? Other than having a really wonderful, ex-husband's new wife.
Having an amazing family support system is, I am so lucky,
We're lucky.
As you know.
Yeah, we are lucky. Yeah.
So I did not always have it together, as you know. I think what was big for me, and I talk about this in the book, what was big for me and kind of life-changing was learning to set priorities. And I tell a story in the book about one of Jenna's, my daughter's first grade teacher. She was nominated for a big award in the school system. And the award would have required a lot of interviews and essay writing and, jumping through a lot of hoops. And she declined. She declined the nomination. And everyone was shocked because she's this wonderful teacher. Don't you want to have a plaque on your wall that says you're the teacher of the year? Who wouldn't want that? And she said, look, I have two priorities. Priority number one is to be the best wife, mom, grandma I can be. Priority number two is to be the best teacher I can be. And applying to be teacher of the year is not going to align with either of those. I mean, it would be fun, but it wouldn't make me a better teacher. So it was like a light bulb went off in my head. Like, oh, you don't have to spend time on things that aren't important to you. So after I heard that from Mrs. Walsh, I got out a Post-it note. I sat down at my desk and I wrote down, be the best mom I can be and build my business.
Wow.
And I kept that Post-it note in my day planner for probably 10 years. And then every time someone asked me, will you do this? Will you do that? Does it align with either of these priorities? If the answer is no, I can say no without guilt.
It's interesting and timely too, as we, this is a question that's coming, but also the idea of self-care and knowing your limitations. I can't help but think about the Olympics and Simone Biles and her choice to step out of the team competition. And I will say yesterday, as I was walking with a number of people, and then I actually met with a few folks last night that I was saying, and I heard such criticism of her decision to do it. And I think about your book and I think about self-care, and it really made me sad that, I'm listening to these people be like, how could she do such a thing? There's something wrong with her. And I was like, oh my God, this young woman made a decision. As you said, her priority is her mental health and her decision for self-care. And I cannot imagine the level of scrutiny that this poor woman, young woman, is under. And so I ask you, again, like, what are your thoughts, and just when you see these things where people, mental health is an incredibly important issue and people dismiss it constantly. And I think that that's why when I actually asked you earlier about self-help and is this a self-help book, and you said really, no, it's not. What do you think? What are your thoughts on kind of what you've seen and what you see in society related to the choices that you're describing in this book about self-care?
First of all, I think Simone Biles is a superstar, a self-care superstar. And I tweeted that yesterday because I agree. I couldn't believe the hate that she got. I think that women who make these types of choices are often vilified for them. And I tell a story in the book about how I was afraid, are people going to like me less if I do X, Y, and Z to take care of myself? And the answer is yes, they do. They like me less. Do I care? No. Because I know my priorities. As long as my kids love me and my business is thriving, those are my priorities.
And we love you.
Thank you. So yeah, I think that we live in a society where women are taught to overwhelm themselves to the brink of exhaustion. And if you martyr yourself, if you sacrifice yourself, you are, that is like the highest compliment, you know, like people think it's so great when women shove their own needs out the door and do things for other people. And
Yeah.
it's so backwards. It's so backwards. It makes me angry. Can you see?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm the worst. I'm terrible. I never say no. I'm always, you know, there's always, I never say no, and I'm always doing for others. And I think, you know, I need to not just read your book. I actually need I need to actually practice this. I need to strategize this on my own as well. And, you know, I do think that in particular, when a woman makes a choice as it relates to her health, it does, you're right. I mean, people you're vilified, and it's a terrible thing. It really is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was incredibly brave of Simone Biles to make that choice. And I have so much more respect for her now than I did 3 days ago, you know, before this all happened, because of her courage.
Yeah.
Because she knows, she knew what was going to come. She knew.
Yeah.
And she did it anyway, because this is what was best for her. And a lot of us, you know, it's very hard to make those decisions that, you know, are going to make people talk about you or like you less. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, for all of us, for me included.
I hear you. Well, this has been, to me, an amazing conversation. We've got time for one more question, and I think it's a really good one. Having been a former CEO myself, what advice would you give to a woman who might have a great idea for a business, but is afraid to pull the trigger? What advice would you give to her?
Well, I always say, I think it's best to think about what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail. Like, don't even think about failing as an option. Like, so what would you do? What step would you take? You know, and take a baby step each day. I think don't overwhelm yourself, but just do one thing each day. Just take a step closer each day. And maybe the business isn't meant to be and it doesn't work, or maybe it does. But if you let that fear go and just put one foot in front of the other, that's really what it comes down to. That's the way to get a business going.
Wow. Well, I know that will be, you know, appreciated advice, because it is hard. And I do think with all the culmination of things that we've talked about today, women have fears of taking that first step. And I do think that one of the first steps that people should do now is actually buy your book. It is.
I agree. Here it is. Overcoming the Mom Life Crisis.
There
Nina
we go.
Restieri. Thanks for the plug.
Of course.
Nina, I just wanted to say that I'm here today representing YWCA Greenwich, but personally, thank you so much. I'm not a mom, and I'm going to buy your book. And I honestly already
Thank you.
texted my two sisters who are moms and my mom, and I'm getting the book for them, because as a woman, I feel like we could even add to your title, the woman life crisis, because honestly, so much of what you've talked about is just totally, I can relate as a woman. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
Thank you for being brave enough to start to take care of yourself and then to share it with others. And I love your priorities, mom and business, and keep it up, because you've helped me today. So thank you.
Wow.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And what I have to say for YW is thank you for taking the time today to share your story with our guests. And many thanks to you, Tara, for being a special part of the program. Honestly, I loved your questions, Tara. They were really insightful. prompted, insightful responses. And I'm so grateful you're on the board of the YW. And then to all our guests, thank you for being with us today. We hope you'll join us again for future YW events, and enjoy your day.
Great. Thank you,
you.
guys. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take care.